I'm Christy Mitchell from the Weymouth Church of Christ. You got that? To get started, I just want to take a minute and thank you. And I haven't even spoken 5 words and I'm going to cry. But so many of you were a part of this journey with us. And I just want to start by saying thank you. You all were an incredible encouragement to our family. I know that we felt your prayers. I know that we felt your love, and we saw a lot of blessing from that. And that's a lot of what I'm going to share with you today. We saw God's hand at work in our experience the whole way through this whole year. And I know that it wouldn't have been that way without the encouragement and the love and the prayers from you. So thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to be able to share from our experiences, our walk with God through this year. I really appreciate you letting me do this. Can everybody hear me back there? Okay, good. All right, I just want to make sure before I get going. I want to say this. Even though our entire family has a testimony, each of my children have their own testimony. Each of them changed and grew. Each of them will be different because of our experience this year. My husband has his own testimony. I'm going to share my own testimony. And so if you came expecting to hear a lot about Jared, there'll probably be a little bit about Jared, but I want you to know, as a mom, as a wife, as a woman, what I experienced. And so a lot of this is going to be a lot more personal than it is our whole family. So I hope that's okay with everybody. It will get personal, not only for me, but for you. And so I appreciate you being willing to put yourself out there today, to be a little vulnerable, hopefully, to what God is leading you to know. Really, my personal story, our story as a family too, starts like this. Are you crazy? Because that's what we heard when, you know what, I may have to point to you, because I don't know if I can think to do this. Okay. When we initially said to people way back in Iowa that we were moving to Nova Scotia, a lot of people said, are you crazy? Where is that? And if there was a little hesitation in the fact that they wanted to encourage us, that they just didn't know what to say, I knew that they may not be saying, are you crazy? I knew they were thinking it. And so it was a little disconcerting, thinking that we were going to a place that we had not seen before. And but we knew God was leading us here. And no matter what, no matter how many times we heard, are you crazy, or what are you thinking, or where's that, we knew without a shadow of doubt, this is where we needed to be. We knew that. Now, God took us on a journey, though, before we got to the place of deciding to come to Nova Scotia. And I want to share a little bit about that, because I think you need to know how it is that God molded our hearts and prepared us for this place, for really where we are right now. Even in the hospital, for the last year, I've had a lot of people ask me, where is Weymouth? And why are you here? You know, a lot of that. Go to the next slide. Mark 16:15 says, he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Well, we went to a class, Darren and I went to a kind of a college-level class called Perspectives, and it was hosted at our church. One thing that you need to know is that we came from a church of 850. My husband was the youth minister there, and I was the children's minister. And that church hosted big events, obviously. It was a huge congregation, a huge church building. And so we would have events at our church, and this Perspectives class was a part of that. There was about 60, 65 people that attended that class. It was a weekly class for several months, and it was a 3-hour class. Every time we met, we sat for 3 hours. So it was very intense, and we learned a lot. Part of each time we came together, there was a different speaker that was flown in. And half of the speakers talked about their testimonies about going into all the world and preaching the gospel. And we heard people that had been missionaries to China and to Cambodia and to all the ends of the earth. I mean, people that had been through some real amazing situations, and it really changed our perspective. That's why it's called Perspectives. It was there to change your perspective. And it really started making us think globally, that really, our mission is not about just here in this place. It's globally. God calls us to have a global mission, so anyway, we started thinking like that. And not only half of the class was about the testimony, the other half of the class was about how the Bible speaks to going into all the world, from the beginning of Genesis to the end of Revelation. And that was so eye-opening to see how God talks about his plan through the entire Bible. And it really opened my eyes to God's plan. And then it started sinking in even deeper, and this is where you're really going to think I'm crazy, because I started praying differently. And I asked Darren, I was talking to him about what I was going to share with you, and I said, did you do this too? Did you pray like this? And he said yes. And I kind of had an idea that he did, because we wouldn't be here, but if we had not been united in this. But the way that I started praying is, I said, God, I want to do something crazy for you. There's that word. I said, I want to do something radical. I want to live on the edge. I had no idea that I was talking about Nova Scotia. The edge of I can see it from where I live, I had no idea that that's what I was praying about, but I honestly believe now, in hindsight, that that's what we were praying about, is that God would lead us to Canada. There were other situations that were sort of radical that happened in that next year. One is that we invited a boy that was 15 that was homeless to come and live with us for about 10 months. And that was an experience, and it was different, and it was something that, was a radical call. It was a little crazy at times, too. But it was a good thing that changed us and grew us. And then we started looking at different jobs, and this is where it led. Now, testimony, let me just mention this to you. You asked me to come and tell my testimony. And testimony involves weakness. Everybody eventually has a testimony, and you have to experience a weakness. You have to know that you're weak, and then recognize God's faithfulness in that weakness. And I believe that's what I have to share with you, is that we went through a time of being weak and needy, and God came through in a very mighty way. And when you ask God to bless you, and you ask him also to put you in a place of being crazy and radical, you're going to experience a little weakness. You're going to, because it's beyond you, right? It's beyond what you know you can do. And I had to move away from my family, and I've had to leave all my best friends, and so have my kids. And it's been a pretty difficult transition. But I'll tell you what's interesting is that when we came here, we felt so enveloped. You all, Waverly Church of Christ, just loved on us and took us in as family. And 2.5 months after we moved here, Jared was diagnosed. Our youngest guy, Jared, 11 years old, started talking about how he had some pain in his leg. And it started before we moved, and I thought, well, growing pains, right? I mean, he's 11. And so I really didn't pay much attention to it. We had several flights of stairs in our house, so I thought maybe he's just tired from going up and down stairs, carrying boxes, because we're moving. So I really didn't pay much attention to the fact that he had this pain until after we moved, and things were getting settled, and we were kind of getting familiar with people and starting to move into our house. And I saw him running down the driveway, and I could really see a dramatic limp. And I thought, I better take him to the doctor. So I called around, couldn't get in to see a doctor, and I had heard about a clinic, so I took him to the clinic, and the doctor there said, you know, for a kid this age, he shouldn't be experiencing that kind of pain. I'm a little worried about it. He said, let me send you for x-rays today. So we drove back to Digby, went to have some x-rays done, and he had told me, the doctor had told me, he says, I'm going on a ski trip. I'm going to be gone for a while, but as soon as I get back and I get the results, I will call you. I was expecting at least a week. I didn't expect to hear from him. And he called me the very next day. And he said, I'm really concerned. This is really unusual. And he said, I'd really like you to go do an MRI. So we went to Yarmouth, and we went through the MRI. And that was about a week later. And while I was en route from Yarmouth to Weymouth, the radiologist called my house. The radiologist, which is really unusual, if you know what I'm saying. Usually it's the radiologist calls the doctor and the doctor calls the patient. But the radiologist was so concerned about what he saw that he called our house. And by the time I got there, I did not have a cell phone with me. And my kids said, this guy called from Yarmouth and you need to call him back. And so I called him and he said, I want you to go to Digby like right now. I want you to get in the car and drive over to Digby. I'm going to call the doctor there. He's a friend of mine. And he said, I really think that this needs to be looked at more serious. He said, I think it's a pretty strong infection. So I was like, oh, okay, well, that's a little scary, a little immediacy here. Boom, boom, boom. Things are happening pretty quick. So we go to the doctor in Digby, went to the emergency there, and took my husband with me at that point. And he said, you know, I'm really not sure what this is. I can see a hairline fracture. But he said, I just am a little, I'm unsettled with it. I'm going to send you to IWK. So at that point, I'm like, what's IWK? You know? I had no clue what he was talking about. He said, this is a children's hospital, and I want you to go. So he says, I'll make the appointment, I'll give you a call. So we went home, and we got a call a few hours later, and he said, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, they want you. So it was like, whoa, you know, just kind of took the wind out of us that this was just so fast. And all the while pretty blind to the fact that this could be anything all that serious. So we get in the car, we go up there. We also had Stephen Barr, his family came over, and they said, we're going to take care of your other 3 kids, we'll feed them. And he said, also, I want you to know you should probably take a bag to spend the night, because you never know what kind of tests they're going to want to do for several days. Well, that was, oh, okay, I didn't think about that. So I was really glad that they were there to help us. So we did, we loaded up overnight for all 3 of us, and we got on the road and went to the hospital the next morning. Well, from there, it was pretty slow. And we were in the hospital through the Easter time. And of course, there's not a whole lot of tests and stuff like that that happens over the holidays, but they did call an emergency MRI technician to come in and do a few things. And they get paid really, really extra big chunk of money when it's something like that, you know, a call in the middle of a holiday. So we felt like, ooh, you know, she told us, the technician told us that they called her to come in extra. So we thought, well, that's kind of concerning. So, you know, then we started to have that feeling like, oh, this is really pretty serious. And as time went by, it was an agonizing wait. But on April 6th, we got word that this could possibly be osteosarcoma cancer. But they were not 100% sure, and so they said, okay, we want to do a biopsy. So, so then we had to wait for, you know, the biopsy schedule and all of that. And so when we did, when he went through the biopsy, I want to read to you what I wrote. I have my journal up here. And it's kind of interesting because, you know, as I said before, God prepares your heart. He gets you ready. If you have a relationship with him, he gets you ready for what you're going to encounter. And I firmly believe that, and this is proof right here that he was getting me ready. On July 14th, he had the biopsy, or July 11th, he had the biopsy. I said, so today is the biopsy. There's a little risk involved, but I'm not too worried. Jared is doing good. He's still sleeping here at 8 o'clock. And the doctor came to visit us at 7. The only worry Jared has is how it'll feel to go to sleep, because he had never been put to sleep. And then it says, I read Jeremiah 17:5. Well, it's interesting that Jeremiah 17:5 through 10 said, we're going to read that pretty soon. Could you click along to that? Oh, I got to back up and tell that story. Okay, wait. I can't believe I skipped this. I'm sorry. When we were moving here, this was stamped on the side of our U-Haul. Proof that we're supposed to be here. Personally, I have never seen any Canadian province stamped on the side of a U-Haul in the States. Never. But in little tiny Marshalltown, Iowa, we got this truck that said Nova Scotia. Is that crazy? Okay, and I even had to go in and talk to the U-Haul guy and say, do you guys do that? like, do you get the trucks that say where these people are going? That's really cool. And he goes, oh no, that does not happen. So, yeah, anyway. So, we were crazy, but we had proof from God, right? That we were supposed to go. Okay, the next picture is our kids after we moved here. And you can see Jared with his full head of hair, and the kids, and they were, part of recognizing when God is doing something is seeing these stamps of approval, and we saw that in our kids. Even though they were sad that they were leaving what they always knew, and they were leaving grandparents in the States, they were excited, and they loved it. They still love it, but they loved moving here. It was really exciting for them. So that was just them at Gilbert's Cove having a good time. I'm going to ask a couple of ladies to come up and help me for a minute. I've asked Laura Titus to come up and draw, and I've asked Jacqueline if she'd come up and read a scripture. And I wanted to share with you that this scripture, this is what I read on April 11th. And it really solidified in my mind the fact that you have to be grounded in the Lord in order to endure something. Anything. Any disappointment, any frustration, even those little everyday things can totally wrap you up in a very frustrated state, right? Unless you are planted in a foundation with the Lord. And so this scripture really illustrates that, and I wanted her to really illustrate that. So Jacqueline is going to read that for us.
Jeremiah 17:5-10. This is what the Lord says. Cursed are those who put their trust in mere humans, who rely on human strength and turn their hearts away from the Lord. They are like stunted shrubs in the desert with no hope for the future. They will live in the barren wilderness, in an uninhabited salty land. But blessed are those who trust in the Lord and have made the Lord their hope and confidence. They are like trees planted along a riverbank, with roots that reach deep into the water. Such trees are not bothered by the heat or worried by long months of drought. Their leaves stay green and they never stop producing fruit. The human heart is the most deceitful of all things and desperately wicked. Who really knows how bad it is? But I, the Lord, search all hearts and examine secret motives. I give all people their due rewards according to what their actions deserve.
Okay, so can you see where reading that on April 11th was preparing my heart for this diagnosis? That my hope and my confidence needed to be firmly planted in the Word of God. That's what I believed as I read that. But that's what God was telling me. He was directly telling me, you need to be absorbed in my, and saturated with my Word. And so that's what I did. I was really encouraged to be able to do that. So I wanted her to draw this because as I journaled those few days right then, I drew this picture. I literally drew out the little shrub in my journal, and I drew a picture of the tree. And I think it was because I needed to wrap my head around the fact that what does that look like? What does it really look like to have roots that go deep down into the river? And so because I needed that illustrated, I thought maybe you needed that illustrated, and I wanted you to see as we talk through what that looks like. You see the shrub up here, no foliage on it, it's black, it's in a barren, it's a salty land. Nothing can grow in salty land, right? Very dry, salty land. And that's what we look like to God when we don't have faith. When we go through something, we wither up. We shirk back, right? And we feel dry. But as she draws this tree and the water that goes to that tree and supplies the roots, think about what that looks like when you see that we have water all over the place. That's another thing that's amazing to me. I love it. The Sissebu River, there's just trees, huge trees all over the place. Well, those trees don't exist like that. These awesome trees without their roots being planted in a source of water. And the Word of God is that source of water for you and for me. And when our faith believes that, when our self really puts our faith in that we can get that source, that refreshment from there, then that is what supplies you. It's uplifting. I want to tell you share an experience with you that I went through as she continues to draw. Thank you, Jen. That happened to me that was a source of refreshment. And if you could click ahead to the next one. I put a lot in there. Okay. This is unusual to see, I know, but this was a source of refreshment for me. What happened is we had an emergency situation with Jared where he was really, really, really sick and from the chemotherapy, and we were at home with him. And at that time, he had not gotten a feeding tube. He eventually ended up with a feeding tube because he would get so, he would throw up so much that he didn't have anything in him. So he had to have some source of nourishment. But before he had that, he got really, really weak and sick, and he could not hold any anti-nausea meds down. So everything I would give him, he was throwing it up, and it was just, we were just so frustrated and didn't know what to do. And my husband said, we're going to Yarmouth. I can't do this anymore. So we put him in the car, and he was so weak. Darren, picked him up, carried him to the car. And then we got to the Yarmouth Hospital, and so here I stayed with him. It was probably a Friday or Saturday, so Darren had to go back and get ready for church on Sunday to preach. And so Jared and I were there at the hospital. Well, as time went by, it turned out that Darren couldn't come, and there was just a series of events where I was the one at the hospital with Jared in Yarmouth for a little over a week. And by the end of that little over a week, I was just kind of going stir crazy because it's a very small room. I'm a little claustrophobic. And not only that, but Jared was just awful. I think he had his first round of C. diff at that point. C. diff was terrible for him. And so it was just a down and out time. I was emotional and really at a point where I was exhausted and tired of being there. I'm ashamed to say. I really wanted my husband to come and relieve me, but he couldn't. And I went to the desk where the nurses were, and I said, I just need to get out of here. I need some time. And they said, that's all right. And they said, we'll put him on the monitor. So just go on. You do what you need to do. So I went in the backyard. And it was about, I wouldn't say it was about this time of year. It was maybe mid-May. And I went to the backyard of the hospital at Digby, and it's absolutely beautiful back there. There's a grassy place, there's a little bit of trees or shrubs, and then there's the ocean. And there's a picnic table out there in that little grassy area. And I'd never been to Yarmouth Hospital until then, so I just happened to find this little spot, and I was like, wow, that's nice, I'll just go right there. And the sun was shining, and so I was sitting there, and I just put my head down, I sat on the picnic table, and just dropped my head, and I was just praying, and you know, God, you've got to help me here, because I can't do this by myself. I don't want to be here anymore. I just want to get out of here. I don't want to see him like this anymore. I'm tired. I'm just tired. And I was at my end, obviously. And I looked up, and this deer came out of the woods. Not this one. I wish I had that picture, but I didn't have anything on me to snap the picture. But this deer comes out of the woods and looks right at me. That's why I thought this picture was perfect, because he looked right at me. And I just went, I mean, it kind of freaked me out, because this thing was looking at me. And I wasn't sure what he was going to do, you know, run at me or what, you know, and did he think I had food? So I was a little nervous, but at the same time it was like, wow, this is an incredible moment. And I just kind of stopped and stared back at him. And after a while, he ate a little bit, looked back up at me, and off he went. And right then, I was like, wow, thank you, God. Thank you. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but it really was a relationship thing with God that happened. There was this communication with God that happened at that moment. And I think part of it is because I remembered a song that we used to sing as a kid, As the Deer Pants for the Water. Does that ring a bell for you? Oh my goodness, what a refreshing. As the deer pants for the water, you know? And that's what I went to in my head, and I just sang it. I just sat there and sang the song. And I was like, that's right. That's right. I do pant for you. That's what I'm sitting here doing. I'm begging for you, and you're going to supply. You have the water, so you're going to supply. And it was just uplifting and encouraging, and I just was revived. I was totally revived. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that a yay God type situation? That I walked back into the hospital totally refreshed, had had a chance to take a breath and say thank you, God, and went past those nurses and I said, I gotta tell you what happened. And I shared with them and they laughed. They thought it was so cool that I saw a deer out there, and they said, oh, well, they do that. They come out. One other experience of refreshing, oh my goodness, that's looking good. See, what I think is neat about this is that there's an abundance of fruit that comes off. Am I getting dry or not? You're right. So this abundance of fruit, it just continues to come out. And do you know, I had people telling me when I was posting on Facebook, I did a lot on Facebook, a lot of people communicated with me on Facebook. And it can be a good tool. It can be a bad thing, but it can be a good tool if used in the right way. And I had a lot of people saying, I'm so encouraged by what you say. That's that fruit. That fruit wouldn't have come without being planted, without God leading me to this place of being planted and rooted in His Word, right? It wouldn't have happened that way. One other story I want to share with you that was a refreshing. And while I'm sharing this story, you want to make sure everybody gets an index card. That would be helpful. One time that we went back, the first time that we had to go back to the hospital. Now, let me explain this. That night that we left and went to the IWK with our little one bag of one night's clothes, led to 6 weeks. And we were in the hospital for 6 weeks during diagnosis and waiting for diagnosis. I mean, it was just long. It was kind of neat. This was a little piece of refreshment to me. But Pam Sullivan and Lori Wheatley had boys that were playing hockey, and they had a tournament up there. And the boys kept winning. And so they kept sticking around and coming by and bringing us food and brought us magazines and brought us stuff to do. And Taylor Wheatley, bless his heart, handed his iPad over to Jared and said, "Here, use my iPad while you're here." And so that was a huge blessing to me. Those two sweet ladies, they came and visited me one night, and they were at the hospital room while Jared was sleeping till like 11 o'clock at night. And I needed that. I needed that refreshment from my friends, my sisters in Christ. It was a huge blessing to me. But when we finally left, and then we were on our way back for the first time, after he had been through chemotherapy once at this point, he'd already been through chemotherapy once. And we went back home, and then when we had to tell him we're going back, it was a very difficult time to tell him. Because he was starting to feel better, and chemotherapy made him extremely sick. He had to have 5 anti-nausea drugs, but it took them a while to figure out how much anti-nausea drugs, and so we went through several chemotherapies before they came up with the right thing, and it still made him very sick. And if you know anyone that's had cancer and been through chemotherapy, the more chemotherapy that they ingest or that they take, the weaker and sicker their bodies get. And so coming back, and after the first chemotherapy, he kind of bounced back okay, and he was able to eat, and he was doing pretty good. And so it was really difficult to say, and now we're going back for another round. And it was difficult for Darren and I. We didn't want to take it back. I remember going for a walk with Kelly McDormand, and just bawling my head off. I don't want to take it back. I just felt like a little kid, you know. I don't want to take it back. I just don't want to go. And just feeling like I was taking my little lamb and just laying him on the slaughter. I mean, that's how I honestly felt every time. But we had to tell him that, and so telling him, tomorrow we're going back, was devastating for him. He just, I don't want to go back. At this point, they wouldn't let him walk. He was in a wheelchair. And so he was sitting in his wheelchair looking out the front window, and I mean, he just shut down. He totally shut down. And I shut down, my husband shut down. We really did not want to go. And we were leaving Alex, our oldest, and our two younger middle children at the house. And so the next morning, we had to gear up and go early in the morning. And as we traveled for 40 minutes, none of us said a word. It was complete silence. We always put Jared in the front seat so that he could look out and not be so nauseous, because even if he was feeling okay, he still had a tendency to get nauseous in the car. Now he doesn't, which is woohoo. But he sat in the front, I sat in the back seat, and I literally looked out the window and just cried. I mean, I was just like, I don't want to take him back. Why do we have to do this? And I kept thinking, I kept questioning even the doctors, which is silly now, but to question, why would they give him all this before surgery? Just take the stuff out. I mean, I was rationalizing to try to make this go away. And my husband said, we need some music. So I asked Jared if he brought his iPod, and we've got those little adapters that go into your sound system so that you can play your iPod. So he started playing DJ for us. And which was good for him to get his mind off of it, and wise thought from the husband driving over there. I was really happy. And some of the songs that were played, I know without a doubt, it was God reaching down and talking to me. And one of the songs, I want to play this for you. I mean, I don't want to play it for you because I don't have it, but I want to read this for you. Even when the rain falls, even when the flood starts rising, even when the storm comes, I am washed by the water. And what that did for me, as I was sitting there singing those words and tears just streaming down my face, I was thinking, you're helping me to remember the relationship that matters. The eternal relationship that matters. That's right. No matter what happens in this earth, I am washed by the water. No matter what happens in this earth, my sweet baby that's sick is washed by the water. No matter what happens, the driver of my vehicle, my sweet husband, he is washed by the water. Thank God we have this eternal relationship. That when we go through difficult situations, we can say, I have an eternal relationship. And it's going to stay there no matter what. So I'm listening to these words and tears are streaming down my face and I'm just like, that's right. It doesn't matter what rain comes in our life. I have Jesus. And so I gave you an index card because I just want to take a minute to stop and I want you to fill in those lyrics for you. And then stick it in your Bible or stick it in a book or whatever. And if you need a pencil, we have some extras. And I want to thank Laura. Thank you, Laura. That's awesome. Thank you very much for drawing
beautiful.
that for us.
Lovely job.
And you guys can get a vision there. But think about it. What is the black hole for you? What are you dealing with that you need to remember that you are washed by the water? Is it a relationship issue? Is it you're dealing with depression or anxiety? Is it you don't know what's going to happen next? I want you to rewrite those lyrics to fit your situation. Even when divorce comes, even when separation comes, even when sickness comes, what is it for you? And then finish it with the statement, I am washed by the water.
Yeah, she did. She did. You want that? That's what I like.
While you're finishing that, another song that Jared played from his iPod is a David Crowder song that it says, He loves us. And it says it over and over. The song just repeats that a lot. He loves me. Oh, how he loves us. And I just let that song just soak into my soul because I needed to know at that point that he still loved me.
You keep that and I'll keep this one.
You know, when you're struggling and you're dealing with anxiety or depression or the issues that you wrote down on your card, you need to know that he loves you no matter what. No matter what you're dealing with, he still loves you. If it's sin, if it's darkness that's in your life, in your heart, he still loves you. And to hold on to that truth is so important. It's so important. A lot of things happened that helped me remember that I had this connection to God. I had cards rolling in for Jared from you churches and from the States. And I had prayers. We had prayers, of course, being spoken for us. Our church did one whole prayer time that was so special. That was prayer service for us and others that were in need in our church. One really cool God thing that happened is my dad was, who of course lives in the States, was in the Navy. And when he was in the Navy, he knew a guy named Kevin Marchand. And Kevin and my dad, of all the guys that my dad was in the Navy with, Kevin and and my dad kept in contact over all these years. Sometimes it was email, but he even in the last couple years has come to where my parents live in Nebraska and seen them. So my mom got to meet him and his wife, and they really got along very well, and it's just kind of neat that this relationship has continued. Guess where Kevin Marchand lives? Dartmouth. Is that a God thing? Yeah. Yeah, it gives me goosebumps thinking about it again. And my mom says, so where are you? You know, telling her about the IWK. We're in Halifax. And she said, honey, and she's talking to my dad, where does Kevin live? Dartmouth, or it's near Halifax. So my mom says, your dad's got a friend there. And he's a believer. He's a Christian. And so that was really cool because Kevin and Kathy, once my dad got in touch with them, came to see us and spent a lot of time with us. In fact, we've stayed in their home many times now. And they were an incredible blessing to us. They have been an incredible blessing to us through this whole experience. And I'll share with you something else that Kathy did for me later. But anyway, that was very special. We also, and they just happen to be friends with Nina and Andy as well. And then they also have a mutual friend named Lynn Douglas, who works right there at the IWK. And Lynn came up and she prayed with Jared, and she really loved Jared, and still loves him, I guess. But she brought, from her Bible study group, they would buy him little gifts occasionally and come and see us. I mean, people were planted at the right time and the right place to refresh us. And I honestly believe that is because we trusted that God was going to take care of us. And He did. He took care of us in a very, very real sense. One special thing that Lynn did for us is that during Thanksgiving, Christmas, she had dinner for us, and we were able to go over. One of us stayed with Jared, and then the rest of us went over to Lynn's house and had Christmas dinner with her and her mom. And how special is that, to go into a home when we'd been sitting in the hospital for months and months and had no idea if we were going to have Christmas dinner, you know, and to go there and then to fill up a big plate for Darren and bring it back. And, you know, it's just really, really special. There's some really neat things that happen for us that way. Darren and I have been married and in ministry for 21 years, and although that's probably a drop in I think you might agree with me that it's probably long enough to have had some time to really observe people in their relationships with God. And I firmly believe that the story of the sower is something that I've personally witnessed. And maybe many of you have too. But I just want to explain it kind of in my own terms and share with you what I believe happens to people in their relationships with God and what happens in life and how they react. People handle situations based on whether they know God or not and what kind of relationship they have with God. I firmly believe that. I've seen it over and over. And the first group of people totally deny that there is a God. They just are, you know, atheists. They do not believe that there is a God. The second group of people are people that attend church sometimes and know about God, but they may not really know God. They just attend church a few times. The third group of people are those that go to church a lot, maybe all the time, serve a lot, are real good doers of the word. For those in Weymouth that went through the fan and follower thing, this is people that are fans of God. That they probably serve in ministry even, teach a Bible class or whatever. And they know a lot about God, but they don't know God. And then, of course, there's the fourth group, and that's the people that wholeheartedly follow God and have a relationship with God, and their entire existence depends on that relationship. That's the fourth set of people. So that when, you guys want to come up? So that when the rain comes, when the flood starts rising, when all those terrible things happen in their lives, this is what happens to these relationships. So the first group of people, those that totally deny that there is a God, what's our time?
11
Okay.
o'clock.
Okay, and a little early. The first group of people, when they recognize crisis in their life, these are the people that deny there's a God. They will run to things of this earth. They will see the things of this earth as places of peace. So they go to people, to friends, maybe to psychiatrists. There's nothing wrong with going to a psychiatrist. I'm not saying that. But that's where they'll find their whole truth. That's where they'll discover themselves. And they rely on themselves, and they rely on drugs, and they rely on alcohol. And they turn to those things. Okay, so the second group of people that go to church sometimes and know about God, they might pray some. But then when they see that God is not meeting their expectations, they will turn to those other things like an atheist. They'll turn to drugs and alcohol. And I've seen it, and so have you. Right? You've seen people turn that have even sat in your pews and gone to church with you. Then the third set of people, those that are pretty much good doers. They're part of things. They are there all the time. Sometimes those people that don't have a relationship with God, even though they're there and doing things, they too eventually, they'll pray really hard. They'll spend time in God's Word. They will ask the church to pray for them. But then eventually, when those expectations are not met, they too will turn to those things of this earth. And you know what that's called? It's walking by sight, not by faith. It's looking around and saying, these things are not really stacking up like I thought they were going to. And so this is probably the route I should take. He's happy, he's drinking. She's happy, she's taking that drug or whatever. And they turn to those things. And they run away from God and they blame God sometimes. Now the fourth set of people, the followers, I'm not going to even tell you because I'm going to tell you in the next thing in the afternoon. But they find their hope, their trust, their confidence because their roots go deep into their faith and their relationship with God. That's what happens, and I'm going to share with you how that happens. But these ladies are going to sing us out. So, it amazes me how everything has flowed. The message, have you heard that message loud and clear? And I want to tell you something. Jess and I had a discussion about this, and she said, I tried to get together with you a couple times. Her and I did. We just had a hard time connecting. I had stuff going on. When she could meet, and she had stuff going on when I could meet. It's just really, we couldn't get our schedules together. But she knew the heart of the message because she kind of walked with us as all Way of the Church of Christ walked through with us. And it's just amazing to me how God led her to bring the right songs. Crystal, that song I think was divinely given to you to just fit into the message. Joshua 1:9 is our theme scripture for Jared this entire time. That says, be strong. Actually, it's on PowerPoint. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord, your God, is with you wherever you go. That was our theme scripture. So, and that was the heart of that song. So I just think it's amazing. I also want to take a minute and say, wasn't that an awesome lunch? Personally, I could eat soup every day. So that was like perfect for me, the soup thing and sandwiches. It was such a great time over there, and just some time to relax and fellowship and enjoy each other's company. And I thought that was a great way for us to also worship together as a group of ladies. I'd like to also ask those that have planned and worked and cooked, baked those cakes, those yummy cakes, if you could stand up so we could give you a hand. Those that did that. Come on, ladies. Up you go. They have been working tirelessly this entire week, I know, baking and getting all of that ready. And I'm amazed at 5 people putting all of this together, personally.
We had help from other people too.
This session is about focusing on what's eternal. My whole intent in the first session was more about understanding that it's about your connection with God. And now I want to give you some practical suggestions through what I have experienced and what I've seen people experience in focusing on what is eternal. And so the first thing I want to tell you is that, like I said, this was Jared's theme scripture. So, and then the next one, if you could do the next one. Have you never heard, have you never understood, the Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of all the earth. He never grows weak or weary. No one can measure the depths of his understanding. He gives power to the weak and strength to the powerless. Even youths will become weak and tired, and young men will fall in exhaustion. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. Isn't that perfect when we're dealing with crisis, that we understand that we're going to have trials in this earth, right? We're going to have problems. There are going to be things that come our way. And Scripture tells us that. But if we have our trust in the Lord, we will find that strength, which is what we talked about with the water and going to the source of the water, which is the Bible and the Word and our relationship with God. Well, because I believe so much in putting the Word into our hearts and minds, I kind of felt that it was my purpose when we went to the hospital each time, and I wish I could count for you how many times we went to the hospital, but it was a lot. I think that Jared spent at least 6 months total in the hospital, probably more than that. It was a 9-month treatment diagnosis to the completion. It was a 9-month experience, but he was in the hospital for most of that time. I don't think Weymouth Church of Christ saw Jared's face very much at all. And when they did, they celebrated with him, and that was nice. But every time we went into the hospital, one of my objectives, my first priority actually, was to go to the playroom there in the oncology department, and they had a huge roll of paper that was attached to the back of the door, and I could just roll off a bunch of paper. And I would just take a whole bunch, and I'd take it back to my room, and I carried markers with me. And the first thing I did is I wrote Joshua 1:9, and I wrote it sometimes for me. Sometimes I just wrote it because I needed to write it down for myself. And then I would write Isaiah 40:28 through 31. And then I would find other scriptures. And I would just write them really big, like poster size. So I have if you can click the next one, I have a picture of that. I don't know if you can see that very well. But that's 2 posters that I had put up there. And I have a teacher-y thing about me, so I've like highlighted different words and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted Jared to, every time he woke up, to see the words of God before him. Plant seeds of truth in the hearts of God, of our people, of our own hearts, the hearts of our children. That is what we need to be doing all the time, but even more so in crisis. If we are putting the Word of God before us, and that's the first practical tip that I have for you, is that when you're going through crisis, you have got to start in the Word of God. As soon as that crisis comes into your life, you look up the Scriptures, you pull your Bible out, and you say, God, help me to know what it is you have for me. What is the truth that I need to know in this situation? And that's exactly what God did for me. He pulled me to His Word right as soon as we were in the midst of this crisis. And even before we moved to Canada, it was like, surround ourselves in the Word of God. Understand that we can go into all the world and preach the gospel. It is just across the border, I realize that. But it was a different, it was a challenge. It was something big for us. And to have that word of the truth of God planted in our hearts, that is what sustains you. That's what takes you to the next thing. And this is how I did this for Jared. Because of this story I'm about to tell you, I know that this had an impact. I also know that prayer had a huge impact on my son's life. And if you do go to MCF, that Heather was talking about, Darren and I are going to do a workshop on prayer in the home. And we'll probably share this story, so you'll probably hear it a couple times. So apologize ahead of time. But Darren might tell a little different. But there was a situation that a place where we hit a rough spot, where Jared was, again, he didn't have the tube yet. He was really sick and really lethargic, and everything I was giving to him, again, he was throwing it up. And we'd already been down that road of going to the hospital in Yarmouth, and Darren was like, I don't want to take him to the hospital. And I said, I don't want to go to the hospital either. I want to do this. We can do this. We can make this happen. But he was a little shell of a little boy. I mean, he was just completely puny, completely weak. He had no strength in him, and he was laying in our recliner. And Darren is like pacing. I mean, you know, a dad with compassion, he's just like, I don't know what to do, and he's just totally beside himself. And usually he's the rock of the family, and usually he's got it together. Well, God gave me that strength that day. And I said, well, I think we can do this too. I'm pretty sure. So I was trying to give him pills, and it wasn't happening. And so then I got a little rattled. And so we're both sitting there going, well, what should we do? Should we call the doctor? Should we go to the hospital? What, you know, we're just racked with what should we do? And Jared got to a place where he was in a lot of pain because he was hurting from being so sick. And he was extremely weak. And he just said, Alex. And he just turned to Alex, our oldest son was sitting next to him in the chair right next to him. And he said, just pray. And it was just precious to me that here we were trying to, you know, we were walking by sight. Remember what I said in the first session? We were walking by sight. We were looking for pills. We were looking for, what do we do? What do we do here? And Jesus, and God reminded the sweetheart of Jared that this is about focusing on the eternal. This is about going to the source that can really give us the strength to do what we need to do. And it blew my mind. It blew my mind that he said that. 11 years old. And maybe he was 12 by then. He had his birthday very shortly after diagnosis. April 29th is his birthday. So he just turned 13 last week. Anyway, so, this week, Monday. So Alex immediately started praying. Alex is a very passionate kind of kid. Those of you from Weymouth have heard him. He preaches a sermon and a prayer. It's just, it's just interesting. He just really has a real spirit-led prayer life. And so he prayed, and Darren and I just dropped to the couch and sat beside each other. And I just had tears again just pouring down my face. And I looked up at Jared. And I want to tell you what I'm about to say is not something that Jared has seen modeled in our home. And so I don't believe that he was trying to mimic anything. But when I looked up and I looked at Jared while Alex was still praying, Jared had his hands like this. And I just, oh my gosh, it just gave me goosebumps. I was crying, and I reached over and I squeezed my husband's leg to get his attention, and I looked at Jared, and so we both, you know, were looking at Jared. Tears came to Darren's eyes, and what it looked like to me, what the vision I got was this little toddler reaching out to the Heavenly Father. You know what I'm saying? You know when a little toddler goes up and says, pick me up, mommy, mommy, daddy, daddy, pick me up. was that moment for him to reach out to his Heavenly Father, recognizing, again, that the eternal relationship is where he's going to draw the strength from. And, I mean, it changed his life. I think that moment was a pivotal moment for him to recognize that. And let me tell you what happened. This is so cool. Because after Alex prayed, Jared put his hands down and he took a big sigh of relief. And he goes, "That's better." And he didn't throw up. And he was able to take the pills. And it took settle his stomach. And it just blows my mind when I think about that story, because, you know, that's a testimony for Jared, but it's a testimony for our entire family that God was working with him despite all other circumstances. So that makes me want to focus on walking by faith, you know, from the mouth of babes sometimes, right? Not by sight, but anyway, so that was an amazing part to it for us. I want to read from 1 Samuel, as she brought up. Sorry, I have to get my iPad Bible. And David and Goliath, we use that story for so much, don't we? It's something that kids, you know, one of the favorite stories of kids. Little kid defeats the big giant. That's always very exciting for kids to learn. And I want to point something out to you in this story, but I'd like to just read parts of it to you. You know, as you remember, probably, the Israelites and the Philistines were in a major battle. And the Philistines, they would come together on the hill, and the Israelites, you know, had their huge army. They were shouting their cry of battle, their battle cry. The Philistines would come, and then there's that Goliath. And he would show up, and he'd throw his insults, and he'd say, you know, all the nasty stuff that he said. He said, Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? Are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he's able to fight and kill me, we'll become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you'll become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." And what did the Israelites do? These big, brave soldiers, warriors, they weren't prepared for battle. What did they do? They ran, and they were scared, and they were terrified, it says. But then there was the little boy, David, who came to bring lunch to the army. And that's who David was. He was a shepherd boy. He was not looked at as a big, strong warrior. It was his big brothers that went off to battle. It wasn't him. He stayed home to tend the flocks. But it was David that came to bring this lunch. Well, so David goes in and he's like, "What's the deal? What's going on?" And so they're telling him, well, this guy. Well, then he gets to see it for himself, and he sees the Philistines. And so David says, well, what's the reward? What if I do this? Well, then his brothers are like, what are you thinking? Really? So right there, his brothers, his own flesh and blood, are starting to, they're looking at him through sight. They're looking at him without faith in God. They're looking at the whole situation. The whole army, even Saul, was looking at this situation by sight. He was seeing what he was afraid of. And not one of them was even considering the fact that God was a part of the situation. They weren't focused on the eternal. See what I'm saying? They were focused on what they could see. But David was a man after God's own heart from a boy. And how amazing the faith that David had. And he says, no, don't let anyone lose heart, because I'm your servant, I'll go. And then Saul is looking by sight. And he says, you're not able to go and fight this Philistine. You're a young man. You're not a warrior. This guy's been a warrior since his youth. And David says, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. And I want you to listen at the end of this, what he says. He says, when a lion or a bear came and carried off the sheep from the flock, I went after it. I struck it and I rescued the sheep from his mouth. Now, can you just see a little boy getting all excited about the stuff he's done, right? He's excited. And he says, when it turned on me, I seized it by its hair and I struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine will be like them, because he's defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the bear, he'll rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, the Lord be with you. And I almost have a hint of sarcasm, don't you think? Saul was a little sarcastic. Yeah, go ahead, the Lord be with you. And David did not wear that. He didn't take on that walking by sight like everybody else around him was. He didn't allow that to control him. I think we do that sometimes. When we're in the midst of a struggle, we're facing a Goliath in our life. We tend to allow what people say to bring us down and to take our focus off of what is eternal, to take our focus off of who we believe in. And when people were saying to us, you are crazy for going to Canada, we could have easily gone, oh, maybe you're right. Or when situation happened with Jared, people could have said, this is really devastating. How are you going to get through this? And we were like, no, we'll be fine. God's going to be with us. And we had that strength from the very beginning, because I read it to you, and when I read about April 11th, God had prepared our hearts. He had prepared us for Canada. He had prepared us for moving away from our family. He had prepared us for the situation with Jared. And I believe it with all my heart that he prepared us to keep our eyes focused on those things. And when all of the other things, the walking by sight things started creeping in, we were able to say, no, you know what? God led us here. He's going to take care of us. God led us to Canada, where our family is not here to take care of our kids. He will take care of us anyway. We're going to be okay. We're going to get through this. And sure enough, God put people in our lives that are just like mothers and fathers and grandparents that took care of our kids and took care of us. And it's amazing. Listen to this. There are, in verse 26, in verse 36 through 37, and in verse 45 through 47, which is what Jess read, David talks about where his faith really is. I will defeat this guy because I have the Lord. And he also said, we are the army of God. God's on our side. Like, what is wrong with you people? That's kind of where I get, from David. So anyway, what an amazing example, right? That he did that. Everything in this world, including this situation with David, is temporary. And we began to start this mantra with Jared, that helping him focus on the fact that not only is God eternal, and your relationship with God is eternal, but everything in this world is temporary. And so walking by sight is also recognizing that these things are going to pass. Everything in this world is going to pass. And if we put our faith in things that are going to pass, we're going to lose. We're going to lose hope. We're going to lose sometimes ourselves to those things that are temporary. But what's so important is that eternal relationship. Jared's treatment came in 3 different sections. The first treatment was 3 cycles of 5 weeks. The first week of each cycle was a very potent, terrible chemotherapy. It's the one that affected him the most as far as nausea is concerned. And the first time he had that drug was the day before my birthday. And it was just a hard birthday. I thought that I was going to be able to handle being there with Jared by myself for chemotherapy. We really didn't have much fear going into chemotherapy. It was kind of like, ooh, but not thinking that this could really have a huge effect on him. And my husband was going to preach, and so he dropped me and Jared off at the hospital. We got him ready for chemotherapy. It was hard. It was not easy. But like I told you, when we had to, we were there for chemotherapy, it was awful. And I was there with him, and he and my husband left. And I had such an awesome birthday with the Lord. And I know that sounds really silly. I mean, even having it come out of my mouth, I think, wow, I was really lonely. But I had this amazing experience because Jared was totally out of it, completely asleep, because they had gotten enough drugs in him for that day. And a couple of ladies from our play group had sent me flowers. And it was so sweet because here we were actually in an isolation room, which was a really difficult thing for me because, like I said, I'm a little claustrophobic. And so being in this isolation room, the window was very little, and it was you couldn't really see anything out the window. Actually, you saw the top of the IWK. That was what you saw out the window. And so I really struggled with that, but in walks this beautiful bouquet of flowers. And it was 4 very sweet ladies that had sent me these flowers. It just made my day. And then I also felt that that was God reminding me that He's there, He's right there, and just as He created those flowers, He created me. And so I got to spend the day, my birthday, with my Creator. I mean, how special is that? It really was. I spent a lot of time in the Word, and a lot of time just praying and listening. I think in this last year, I probably spent more time in prayer than I ever have in my life, and that's good. But as we started telling Jared, I was telling you about the temporary thing, we would tell him, you're going to get through this, it's temporary. You're going to be okay. And one thing that was really difficult for him that he totally dreaded, and I've heard this from every kid we met so many people while we were there. We practically lived there. So one thing that all kids struggle with is port access. They've got this little thing that's underneath their skin, and then the needles go into that thing to be able to distribute the drugs. And he had a double port, which meant he had to be poked twice, and he still does. It's still under his chest. And he hated having that port accessed. And the sicker he got, the harder it was to do that because he was already weak, and his body was weak, his tissues were weak, and so it hurt worse. And he would just dread, just anxiety would come over him. And we tried everything to distract him. He could not be distracted. Like the nurses would say, "Will you turn on the TV?" No. "Do you want a piece of gum?" No. "Do you want to talk?" No. He just wanted to be in a zone, to be able to focus and get through that. And I honestly believe that he put himself in that zone with God. I believe God protected him, and he was going to that place with God in those situations. But every time we would get ready for that port access, I'd say, "You know what? It's not going to last. It's going to be temporary. We're going to get through it really fast. It's going to be poke, poke. You'll feel a little pain for a little while. It's going to go away. You're going to be okay." And so every time we had a situation that he was facing something that he didn't want to face, or even, we all didn't want to face, we would talk about how it's temporary. He went through C. diff several times, so much so that the CDC was called in for our particular case, the Center for Disease Control, because every time he came to the hospital, he kept contracting C. diff, which made us have to stay in the hospital longer sometimes. And then sometimes there was a particular drug, methotrexate, which is given to so many cancer patients. It's very commonly used for most cancers. And your body has to clear that drug before you can leave the hospital. It's just too damaging. And so they keep you there. They keep him there, kept him there, until that drug was out of his system enough where they felt comfortable for him to leave. And sometimes that was just agonizing, waiting for him to clear. the numbers would fall by just a tiny little fraction, and you'd think, oh, this has got to be the day, this has got to be the day, and then we would have to stay. But still, we kept saying, it's temporary. It's not going to last forever. We're going to be home, I promise. Could you go to the next slide? Yeah. And this is also a really good scripture to hide in your heart when you're going through things that you need to see as temporary. I may have told you, I have told you all of this so that you may have peace in me. Here on this earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. And you see that walk by sight and not and walk by faith, kind of the difference there, and it's even in this scripture. So it's through the entire Bible that God tells us to walk by faith, to keep our hope in Him, to keep our eyes focused on what's eternal, not what is temporary. And that's really, I think, what keeps you going. I really do. I think it's the most important thing. Kathy Marchand, I told you about earlier, that was my dad's Navy friend that happens to live in Dartmouth and was there for us. Kathy, when I visited her one time, handed me a book. Oh, can you go to the next one? I'm sorry. Yeah. Called 1,000 Gifts. This book really changed, another perspective change for me, but I had this book while I was in the hospital, and I read through it while I was there. And we spent a lot of hours with Jared sleeping off the chemotherapy, and once they got the right drugs figured out for him, he sometimes for 4 days straight. And so I would just be there. And not only writing scripture on the walls, but reading. And this book, I just want to give you an idea. This is the other practical suggestion I have that I learned from this book. It's so important for us to be aware of where God is working. And when you are focused on walking by sight, and you're looking around and you're seeing things, you aren't aware of God. But if you are walking by faith, then you see everything that comes at you as something from God. And that's such an amazing mindset. Because then you start seeing that every hug that someone gives you is God wrapping His arms around you. Every song, like I said in the car as we were driving, you know, that it's a gift from God. And this book, the practical suggestion that she outlines is to get a spiral, and I started with this one, and you just write out everything that you are thankful for. It's not a priority list. I initially thought, well, maybe this is a priority list. So number one, my husband, you know, but that's really not the concept. The concept is to see everything that is around you as a gift from God. So I wanted to read you some to give you an idea, because if you do this, it does change your mindset to what God, your relationship with God. It changes your relationship with God. When you start thanking Him for things, and the blessings come, and you thank Him, and the blessings come, it's just this awesome communication that you develop with God. And this happened for me while I was in the hospital with Jared. So I'm going to read you 10 things that I wrote. And some of them sound very trivial, but I want you to understand that this is where it's at. This is where understanding the relationship with God was at for me at that time. Okay, number 60, loving husband at home taking care of stuff. 61, I played a game of Blockus with Jared. 62, we watched a movie and had popcorn. 63, Buddington, a clever clown. You ever seen Buddington the Clown from IWK? That man is so intelligent, it's amazing. I mean, he knows how to reach the most He'd go and spend time with teenagers, and teenagers really think that clowns are stupid. And by the time he got done with that particular teenager, I saw these kids laughing, hugging. I mean, they love Bennington. It's really awesome. I got to do a yoga class with moms in the playroom. I've never done yoga in my life, but I enjoyed that. My sweet words, my sweet friend's words of a God story that she shared with me on Facebook. I had a new friend on Facebook, and I wrote my new friend and shepherd, Gwen. And I just want to tell you about her really quick. Darren had a teacher in college, and this teacher took Darren on a mission. He got to go on a mission trip with this guy. And this guy's wife, so Darren's friends with this man and his wife on Facebook, and we were putting all these posts out, and she kept commenting on the things that my his posts, Jared's things about Jared on his community page, and my things, and I thought, where did she come from? I have no idea where this lady came from. So I asked my husband about it, and he said, oh yeah, that's my professor's wife. And so I started a personal conversation with her. And I can't even tell you how shepherding her words were to me. I mean, she just flooded my heart with truth and grace and love and encouragement, and I just thought, wow, I got to write her down, you know. We went to the playroom waiting for Jared to clear from methotrexate, and I took Jared and a firefighter, Firefighter Ross, had a conversation with Jared, really neat conversation. Jared painted a birdhouse, so I said a birdhouse painted red and blue. And 69, getting Jared home, no tummy issues, all the way home. Sorry. And Alex, my older son, had posted a really silly video online, and Jared watched that, and we were all laughing. And just that laughter. But I saw every one of those things as a gift from God. And I think that's really key. Do you agree with me? It's key. We've got to focus on the eternal, deal with the temporary, and recognize that relationship with God, seeing these little pieces that He gives us every day. It's extremely powerful and important. And there's joy that comes from that, right? Lots of joy, even in the midst of our situations. Okay. Another thing I think is valuable, and what was important to our getting through this, is that you've got to have. Oh, I was telling you about his treatment. he had 5 weeks. That he had 3 cycles of 5 weeks. Then he had the surgery portion of it, and he had 2 weeks off of any chemotherapy. Then he had 9 5-week cycles. And starting the 9 5-week cycles was just like, but what was really helpful is that after surgery, we had an amazing, huge answer to prayer during surgery. When they sat down with us and told us what the surgery was going to look like, Jared had about 6 inches of his upper femur removed. And then there was a rod put in. And so as they were telling us this, they said his bones are so little and brittle that we have to use a certain kind of saw to hold his bone in place so that they could cut it. And I hope this doesn't gross you out. We can cut it right. And he said, so this could take up to 12 hours. And so I'm going into this surgery, time going, oh my gosh, this is going to be a long day. And so my husband, the tall ships were in town. And so my husband said, let's go see the tall ships. I'll have my cell phone. They can call us when they're done, but let's just get out and go have lunch. And so we took him off to surgery, prayed for him, and went to the Ronald McDonald House. We stayed there a lot. That's a really awesome place. If you get a chance to minister somewhere or contribute to something, that is an awesome place to contribute and help. And $11 a night you can stay there. That was really helpful for us. We needed that. So we went to the Ronald McDonald House and had breakfast. It was really, really early that he had to be at surgery. 2.5 hours went by and we got a call. We hadn't even left the Ronald McDonald House. And they called and said, we're done. And Darren looks at me and he says, done? And I said, are you sure? And he said, are you sure? I said, yes. And he said, you are talking about Jared Mitchell, right? Because we thought, there's no way. And sure enough, they were done with the surgery, and you know what happened? They didn't have to use that special saw. His bones were thicker than they thought they were, and so they weren't as brittle, and they were able to use and do it quicker than usual. So that was a huge mark for us to go back to. So when we started this 9 sessions, and we knew going ahead that we had just it was going to be tough and hard to walk down that, and it felt like it was going to take forever to get through all that chemotherapy. We kept referring back to, but look how God answered that prayer. And then we had 2 weeks off that he was able to go home. And then the physical therapist was amazed because the second day after surgery he was up and walking with a walker. I mean, he really made huge strides really fast after surgery. And that gave us, you know what I mean by a mark to go back to? It gave us a place in our hearts and our minds to say, there was a victory here. And we got to see this victory played out bigger than our imaginations could conceive. So God will do that again. We can do that again. We can trust that we saw his faithfulness in that. So it's not just the little things, right? It's the big things that you have to recognize that God's power was there, and don't forget them. Don't leave them in the dust and forget. Mark them down, write them down. See them as points of reference to go back to and say, God was there and he was in it, and he's going to be with me in it again, in the next thing. Okay, we have sang some songs that have really coincided with what we're learning. I want to stop for a minute, and I want us to learn another little song, and it's kind of a cutesy song, but I'm hoping that will help you solidify what I'm saying in your mind. Do you remember the old song, the foolish man built his house on sand? Okay, there's another song that's kind of an upgraded song from that song that's called Don't Build Your House on the Sandy Lane. And there's 2 ladies that over lunch, I told them I was going to do this, and they just started singing the song, and I said, yes, you've got to. So before we do that, though, I want you to know that this goes with it. This goes with the whole theme. That if you build your house, just like Jesus said, there's a parable in Scripture, that if you build your house on a sandy land, things are going to fall through. And being in Nova Scotia, we know what sandy land looks like, right? But if you build your house on the rock, if your relationship is solid on the rock with Jesus, then you'll be okay. You'll survive the storms. And when the rain comes, and when the flood starts rising, you're going to be okay because you have that solid relationship. So, okay, come up and teach us this song. And you're going to have to stand up. So listen to the song first, and then I'll have you stand up. And I sing it a little different. I know a southern version. So you're going to hear me say, yee-haw, when they're clapping. So, go ahead. Okay.
Don't build your house on the sandy land. Don't build it too near the shore. Well, it might look kind of nice, but you'll have to build it twice. Yes, you'll have to build your house once more. You gotta build your house upon the rock. Make a firm foundation on a solid spot. Well, the storms may come and go, but
you to know that Jared is doing really good right now. Our lives are never going to be the same. We have a stronger faith. We have a stronger bond as a family. And so all things work to good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And I firmly believe that if we were not called, if we didn't have that eternal relationship solid, we would have fell apart. And honestly, I've seen a lot of that. I've seen a lot of that here. Right? There's a lot of people that I've heard their stories that they've fallen apart. They've lost the Lord. They've walked away from God. And it really burdens my heart to see that. And I don't think it's by mistake that we experience this in a place that we see a lot of that. I don't think it's by mistake. Do you know what I'm saying? I think that God put us here and we experienced this cancer and we went through this difficult time in our life so that I could talk to you and so that we can go shine this message to people that are hurting and struggling and have anxiety and depression and broken relationships and all the various things that happen in our culture. So my prayer is that you will multiply. You will take the encouragement that you received. There's an awesome story of Moses in the Old Testament. He goes up on the mountain and he spends time with God. And that's what we've done today. We spent time with God and with each other. He went up to the mountain and his face was shining so brightly that he had to put a veil over his face to come down down the mountain to the valley below. And then when he was down there, he had to keep his face from shining, but he was still glowing. And people could see that he had been with God. Are you going to go home and reflect that you have been with God? Is there something that you have held deep in your heart that you can get rid of so that you can glow with that eternal relationship with God, so that you can share that with people? Is there something you need to let go of? Well, I hope and pray that in the next few minutes you have an opportunity to do that. So we're going to have some special prayer time. Again, I said Jared's doing really good. He feels good. He's eating. It's been amazing to watch him consume the amount of food that his favorite thing to eat, probably going to laugh, is a peanut butter and marshmallow fluff sandwich, which he has discovered after all this. I know, it's sweet. It's actually really good. But you have to go running if you're me, or walking, because that's all I do. Anyway, but it's so awesome to see him eating. I mean, the other day I just, because he didn't eat for a year. I mean, literally did not eat anything much at all for a year. So to see him bouncing back, God was right in giving us that perspective of after the surgery, because now we see that he was able to rebound and come to that place where he can eat and run and play. It was awesome to get through the surgery and for him to be able to walk again and not be in a wheelchair. I really have an understanding for handicapped people now that I never did before. Like an advocate for making sure that everything's handicap accessible, because there were a lot of times we couldn't get places because Jared's wheelchair, or we had to carry him or whatever. But it's just really awesome to come full circle and to see the mighty hand of God carry us into a different phase of our life. It's really nice to be able to focus on the mundane, the daily, to be able to make meals for my family again. I really took that for granted. And then when, that's an extension of my love for my family. I love to cook for my family. I love to make meals that they love. And for a whole year, I haven't been able to make meals. I had wonderful people in my community that did make meals for my family, so I'm so thankful for that. And there was a couple times at the IWK that the Ron McDonald room inside the hospital allows you to come and make meals if you want to, which was really nice. Jared's last chemotherapy that we were waiting and waiting for him to clear so he could finally go home for the last time. And he was able to wear a shirt home that says "No Mo Chemo." It was really fun. But the last day that we had to stay, and then the next day we could go, the last full day we were there, he was like, "I want pancakes." And I don't want pancakes from the hospital. I want Bisquick pancakes. So I went down to the Ronald McDonald room and I said, "Do you happen to have Bisquick?" And they said, "Yes, we do." And so I took Jared down there and we had pancakes and it was so much fun. It was just me and him and we just had a really neat time together. But okay, so now I want us to finish with, like I said, some time for us to kind of cleanse our hearts of things that burden us, things that are weighing on your heart and mind. Or maybe this is a chance for you to prepare for what's coming next for you. Maybe this is a chance for you to, as you listen to someone else that's dealt with something in their life, a friend of yours, a spouse, a coworker, maybe it's a chance for you to lay them before the Lord. But I'd really like us to take a minute and do something kind of different. Okay. So I want you to each take a piece of this paper. Edith, would you mind grabbing those two? Would you mind making sure everybody gets some? Thanks. Okay, time alone with God. We call this TOG at our house. So my husband, as he leaves the house, he'll tell the kids, "Don't forget to do your TOG." And it's kind of a nice catchy phrase. But for us today, I'd like you to write something down on that piece of paper. I have a little cross here. Trash cans, I'm not here. But the first thing I'd really like you to focus on in prayer before you write something down is I'd like you to really spend some time asking God to help you trust Him above all else, to help you focus on your relationship with God, and to open your eyes. Ask God to open your eyes to what He is doing in your life. Those little things and then those monumental things. Ask God, what are you doing in my life right now? Open my eyes to what you're doing. Help me trust you and help me to focus on our relationship. This eternal relationship, the rock, that when the rain comes, you've got your hope, your confidence, your trust in the rock. So for the next few minutes, Jess is just going to play her guitar softly. And I'd like you to spend some time in prayer about this. I'll tell you what to write down in just a minute. So just focus on praying these things or other things that God reveals to you. And we'll take a few minutes to pray. So go ahead. Pretty much a follower of Darren. And I confess that to you. I really felt that everything he said and did was gospel. I didn't really turn to God for myself. I let his prayer life be mine. And that's a very dysfunctional way to have a marriage. It's not healthy. And because my heart was centered on him. And even though, you know the song that my hope is built on nothing less, there's a line in there that says, I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. Well, the sweetest frame to me in my life was my husband. And I remember singing that song and having those words penetrate my heart and thinking, wow, he's the sweetest frame. And it says, I dare not trust that, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. And so it started to transform my mind to think that maybe I need to be putting my hope in something more eternal. That even this relationship that means the world to me is temporary. Even this relationship. So what is it, ladies, that you put your trust in? Where are you in your relationship with God? Do you deny that he even exists? Do you do the church thing and you know about him? Do you know a lot about him and do a lot for him, but yet lack the depth of relationship? Or do you follow him? Do you trust him? Do you lean on him? Is he your rock? Where are you in your relationship with God? What are you defined by? Are you defined by that relationship with God? Or are you defined by something that is temporary, that's not going to last? Are your roots, do they go down to the source of the water so that you can be refreshed and have strength? What is it for you? You know, it is worth it to trust him. It may be a ride, but it is worth it. It is worth it to trust him. So what holds you back? What is it that holds you back from that full, wholehearted following God? Is there something that holds you back? Is it your pride? Is it fear? Is it anxiety? Is it a relationship? If there is something that is holding you back, for the next few minutes, I'd like you to pray about that and write it down on your piece of paper. I call this a come to the cross type experience. And I'd like to ask you, and I know that the pews are small and it's hard to move and our floor might give away, but I believe God's going to take care of us because he's asked me to do this. So when you're done writing on that piece of paper, if you can get out, and if your friends in your pew will let you, I'd like you to come and drop it at the foot of the cross. And when you do that, please know no one's taking these out and looking at them. And it might even be good, therapeutic, for you to rip it up and realize that those things are not going to set you back anymore. They're temporary, even if it is a relationship. And that's so hard. That's so hard to understand. It's so hard to conceive that this man, this godly man, honestly, this is what I struggled with. This godly man that was my husband, who was a minister, why shouldn't I completely trust him? But I was the fault was I was trusting him over God. And I wasn't going to God, the source, for my own personal life. We can't let that stand in our way. We've got to allow what is eternal to be our focus and to walk by faith and not by sight in what we see. So they're going to sing a song, and while they sing, I'd like to just have the freedom, please, have the freedom to get up and come up and throw it away. No one's going to look down on you. Do not feel judged. I hope every one of you do this. Just recognize that everybody has something in their path that blocks them from a full-out relationship with God. And what is that? Write it down. It's by no mistake that those little pieces of paper say Cancer Society. Because I want you to recognize that for me personally, I left that at the foot of the cross. I was able to rip up cancer in my own heart and mind and say, okay, God, We're going to deal with cancer together. And you can do that with whatever it is you write down on that piece of paper. Let's go ahead. Let me say a quick prayer together, and then you guys can start singing, and then you can sing. Dear God, I just thank you for an opportunity to lay things at the foot of your cross. Help us to recognize that the only thing that is eternal is our relationship with you. It's the only thing we can count on. So we need to develop that relationship. We need to trust you. God, help every woman that walks out of this building today have a complete, full trust in knowing you're going to take care of whatever they write down on this piece of paper. Help them to feel that they can leave it at the foot of your cross and trust that you are going to take care of it with them. You're going to walk beside them. And that when the rain comes and the storms come and the flood rises, that they can be firmly planted in knowing you. And God, I ask that you'll just be with us during this time. Help us to fully lay our hearts out and open toward you. I pray this in Jesus' name.